Hello, everybody, and welcome into the Lions Grid. It has been 207 days since the last meaningful game of football was played in the Super Bowl. And today, the run for the Super Bowl starts now for the Detroit Lions. I'm joined today by Joe Wilmot. Joe, how are you doing today?
Doing good, Kevin.
Glad to have you on the show. And Jeffrey Raymond was going to be joining us, but much like the Chiefs and Travis Kelsey, one of our contributors here going down with a last minute injury, having some technical difficulties, and unable to join us at the moment. He may be trying to get in and get things figured out, but you know what, Joe? It's next man up, so we'll just struggle on without him, just like the Chiefs are going to have to do tonight, potentially without Travis Kelsey. But we'll see. He may or may not be in there. I want to say the injury report is due at like 6:50, so it's just after 6:30 now. So in a little bit, we should know for certain whether or not he's going to try and give it a go or not. But of course, that's I think the big news for Kansas City Chiefs fans with Travis Kelsey. I think he hyperextended his knee on Tuesday, and it's been swollen. They think that his bones bruised underneath there, and so doesn't we're unsure if he'll be giving it a go here in this week one matchup against our Detroit Lions. But Joe, it's been a while since we've been on in the air. We've finally made it through the preseason. We've got here to the regular season. And the Lions, of course, as part of that process, had to cut down. They had to go from their preseason roster down to their regular 50 or 53 man roster. And, I think obviously one of the good things for the Lions is as they get better as an organization, as they bring in better talent, when they have to do those cut downs, they're going to have to unfortunately let go of better players, right? That's part of the problem. You can only keep 53. So as the overall player base gets better for your team, unfortunately, you're going to have to say goodbye to some guys who could have been contributors for you and maybe go on to other teams to contribute. So overall, though, I think if was there anybody who really stood out to you, Joe, as being somebody that you really hated to see them leave, or were you overall happy with how who the Lions decided to keep on their depth chart heading here into the regular season?
I felt like they kept the right players. I felt like the majority of the people that they cut or that they put on the practice squad, were were, were contribute the most in which they would uh, in which they would.
Yeah, most certainly. And I think to your point there, Joe, for me, it's one of those things where I'm going to trust Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell, right? I think they have shown that they are pretty good at evaluating talent and deciding on, which players, are really going to help this locker room and this team move forward. So, I definitely got to see some players like Stephen Gilmore. I'm glad that he made the team. Uh, he was one of those three rookie cornerbacks that was sort of there on the bubble. So I was happy to see him make the team. Obviously we had a lot of young wide receivers too that were vying for spots. Dylan Drummond didn't make the regular squad, but he's on the practice squad. So there's definitely some interesting players, both either on the 53 man roster and part of the practice squad that they were able to keep. And I think overall, to your point, I think they kept a good mix of guys. So it's going to be, I think, there was nothing too surprising. There weren't any really big surprise cuts, and we really haven't made any moves since then where we've brought in anybody off of the other teams that were released. I think oftentimes when teams are cutting down, there can be some impact players that are unfortunately let go or moved on from in some cases. But this year there wasn't really anybody too high profile let go by any of the NFL teams, and so I think a lot of teams you didn't see a whole lot of movement. They sort of designated guys, or they waived the people that they needed to, and then they brought the guys that they thought could help contribute to the team down the road to the various practice squads. So, I think in terms of the roster here, I'm feeling pretty confident about what the Lions are heading into Week One with. Speaking about around the league and cutting down veterans, just to do a quick little tales around the league segment here, where we just take a look at some of the breaking news that's happening in the NFL and get sort of our opinions on it. There's, I think, three big things that I've been seeing out there here in the last couple of days. The first thing is that Nick Bosa with the 49ers signed a huge extension. So the 49ers locking him up, keeping him happy. He's a great player out of Ohio State, Joe. I think he's definitely a guy that it makes sense to spend that type of money on because he is one of the elite pass rushers in the league. But do you think the 49ers did the right thing there, locking him up for the long term?
Yeah, I think they did because the contract he signed was somewhere between like 5 years, 170 million and 122 million guaranteed or something like that, making it just over. I think it was. He was making over 30 million. A season now, and I think it was a good move by the 49ers because they need to have an elite player at that position
Mhm.
or any player on their team needs to be paid the amount that they're going to be paid because they they need to have those playmakers in order to compete for championships, for division wins, division championships or things like that. So what I'm really thinking about is I'm thinking about Joey Bosa, Joe not Joey Bosa, but Nick Bosa, and his contract extension, and Christian McCaffrey. Will
Mhm.
Christian McCaffrey get an extension, or did he already get one? Things along those lines. Because uh, I just think it's important that for the 49ers at least to secure their strong players.
Absolutely. I think they're in a unique position because of having Brock Purdy as their quarterback, where they have a young quarterback who, is in his first NFL contract. He was taken in the seventh round. So he is not, his contract is the amount of salary he's getting, while certainly a lot of money compared to what us people who don't play in the NFL make. For an NFL quarterback is definitely quite manageable, which gives them the ability to then invest that money into those other skill positions. And certainly, pass rusher is a position where I think every team in the league would love to have Nick Bosa on their team. I don't really think anybody would turn him away. So, having that flexibility and that ability to not have to spend that money on a QB at the moment and spend that on players like Nick Bosa to keep them happy, I think the 49ers are in a good place there. Staying out in the NFC West, we have news that Cooper Kupp will be missing the Week 1 matchup against the Seahawks. Of course, the Rams' number one receiver there. Uh, Joe, thinking about the Rams in general, they really obviously it's a team that Brad Holmes came from. It's where we acquired him from. I think they did a good job at one time, sort of building through the draft, and then they sort of went all in. They decided that it was their window, it was their time to go for that Super Bowl, and they started trading draft picks to really bring in the players that they thought could help get them there. Of course, they were successful. They made a couple Super Bowls and they won one, so mission was accomplished. But on the other side of that coin, we're now at the spot where that roster is pretty bare, right? Without having Cooper Kupp out there, there's not a whole lot of weapons on that offense for Matthew Stafford to take advantage of. Do you think if Cooper Kupp, obviously having to miss this first week, but if he has to miss substantial time, what are your thoughts about what that could mean for the Rams moving forward?
I really don't see the Rams having too many playmakers right now on offense. It's like it it's like you take Cooper Cup out of the mix, and it's like then who do they have? You don't see a stud running back. You don't
Mhm.
see who did they have other than Cooper Cup? He won the MVP when they won the Super Bowl. He was the Super Bowl MVP, wasn't he?
He wasn't. The only people that I can name on their roster are Van Jefferson and Cam Akers, the running back. So they are hurting on that offensive side of the ball. Oh, and the tight end, what is his name? Tyler Higbee, I think. That's it. That's what Stafford's working with. So
Yeah, Stafford's Stafford's got his work cut out for him. You know, he's going to have to prove that he's still an elite quarterback. He signed that deal a couple of years ago, and the extension that he signed with them, and you know, it's like, okay, why did he sign that deal if he's not going to be able to make plays with the playmakers around him, or with the with the players that he has around him? Any good quarterback makes the people around them better. That's what we heard with Tom Brady. You know, Tom Brady makes the players around him better, especially at the running back, wide receiver positions or tight end positions as well.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. And it could be one of those things where the end of Matt Stafford's career looks a lot like the beginning of his career, where he comes into a team that was certainly struggling and having losing records. So it's going to be interesting to see what the Rams can do. I definitely don't have a whole lot of faith in them. And then some on the AFC side of things, sort of a brewing story between the on the Raiders roster is some beef between Chandler Jones, their Pro Bowl defensive end, and the coaching staff. He's gone on to Instagram. Chandler Jones has and has voiced his displeasure with the Raiders organization, in particular the coaches there, both head coach Josh McDaniels as well as their defensive coordinator. Um, Says he doesn't want to play for him, and is currently he missed practice the other day for personal reasons, as it was described by Josh McDaniels, and he said he would be there against Denver in their upcoming game. But definitely a strange, there certainly are plenty of storylines this offseason where you have a great example is Chris Jones, who is sort of holding out from Kansas City to get his contract extension. There's been plenty of things where there's been sort of known issues or known frictions between star players and their teams, but this beef between the Raiders and Chandler Jones seems to have come out of nowhere and rather quickly and sort of accelerated. So Chandler Jones is still, he's getting up there now. I think he's 33 years old nowadays, but he is still one of the better defenders in the league. It's kind of surprising to see how fast the well has sort of been poisoned there, and kind of disappointing that it's the Raiders, right? It always seems to be something. There's always somebody on the Raiders who is creating noise or things like that. And Joe, what are your thoughts there about Chandler Jones and if this thing comes to a head, if he gets moved to maybe a different team, or do you think it's something where they'll be able to work things out and he'll fall back in line with the organization?
I think Chandler Jones hasn't been too much of a problem player in the past, and I think that he'll essentially fall back in line with the Raiders organization. I don't see it being a trade being made for him, or a release problem or anything like that. I think he's a solid player. He's a good player, and he's been around. 33 years old. He's been around for years now, at least 10 years in the NFL, I think.
Mhm.
And it will go to show that that if he stays with the Raiders organization and the Raiders, you know, uh, make peace terms with him, then then it'll be beneficial for both him and the Raiders organization.
Well, certainly, I think he's a still a high caliber player. So if you're the Raiders, you certainly want him on your team and out there contributing. And certainly want to see him. To your point, he has been a guy who has not been a distraction to teams in the past. He's not in Antonio Brown or some of the other guys who are sort of known problem childs who the Raiders sort of rolled the dice on. I think the interesting thing too is that Chandler Jones, of course, got his start with the Patriots, so he has history with Josh McDaniels. So it's kind of interesting there that he is sort of clashing with him, considering that they've run into each other before. We'll have to see how it works out. Hopefully, he's back on the field and they can get things squared away. But interesting situation there in Las Vegas, something to keep your eye on. And that leads us into sort of the rumor mills, which we're going to be spinning here and talking and turning, really taking a look at it from the Lions' perspective, because another player disgruntled here recently that is on the Lions roster, Isaiah Buggs. The question is he on the trading block now? He's going to be a healthy scratch tonight against the Chiefs after getting passed on our depth chart. Some people out there thought that maybe there was a chance with this happening that Isaiah Buggs would be traded to either Kansas City or Tampa Bay in some sort of package deal for either Mike Evans or Chris Jones. Chris Jones, of course, the defensive tackle that's holding out, or the defensive lineman holding out for the Kansas City Chiefs. Joe, what are your thoughts there? Is it something, do you think first off, with Isaiah Buggs, do you think this is something that him and the Lions organization can sort of overcome? Because it certainly seems like there's some frustration on his side for being benched here against the Chiefs. And do you think that he could be used in a trade situation to potentially get another player brought in here at some point in time to the Lions?
I think Isaiah Buggs is a good player, and I think that if they needed to trade him for another player that the Chris Jones, uh, they'd have to throw in some more draft picks or something like that because of the quality of player that Chris Jones is. And Isaiah Buggs is relatively. I think he's a young player, but he doesn't have the stats. He doesn't have the reps at that position starting or anything like that to go for a big trade for Chris Jones. But can he work it out with the organization, the Detroit Lions organization? I don't know, because he posted on his Twitter page, or took everything down, and was making a scene on his Twitter page or the X page or whatever, and he was not really saying too much. I saw a few of the tweets about it, and the X tweets. I don't know how to say the X or the tweets or anything like that, but it's like he took something that was good by making the roster and by being on the team, and then all of a sudden he's having problems with the organization some way somehow. I don't know what's going on really.
Yeah, I think it's certainly something where hopefully time will tell. Hopefully, again, I think Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell have done a good job of identifying quality football players who sort of fit a certain prototype. They're sort of guys who have a certain way that they carry themselves and a certain way approach they take to the game of football. So I think Isaiah Buggs is one of those guys. I think he is a little bit upset potentially about the being passed on the depth chart, but hopefully, he can get back in there, continue to work and find a way to contribute to this team. And to your point there about, him potentially having to be packaged up with some trade picks in order to bring in some top tier talent. I guess that's a question for you, Joe. We talked a little bit earlier about, sort of the misfortune of the Rams and how, they took their shot and they really, they sort of leveraged their draft picks to sort of take their shot and really go after a Super Bowl. Do you think, what is your thoughts there about doing a similar thing for the Lions? Do you think the Lions should continue the approach they've been taking where they've been allowing Brad Holmes to really bring in their guys and build their team through the draft? Or do you think the Lions are approaching that window where they should use their draft capital to help them take a shot now?
No, they have acquired draft picks. They have acquired uh, talent through their draft picks. They have all the players that they need. They don't need to trade anything for the future of the franchise. or anything like that. They need to just play with the players they have and keep it simple. They don't need to they don't need to go on and trade some players or trade some draft picks and acquire talent. I think that what they have is good enough on paper to compete for the division, to compete for a playoff win, and to compete for all that stuff. So they have a lot going in the good direction, and I think they're a good football team on paper. So I mean they don't really need to upgrade any positions as far as what they have.
Yeah, for sure. I think they certainly are a very talented team, and really, again, it's kind of I'm parroting or it's kind of redundant. I've already said it a couple times here, but I'm going to trust in the team's leadership. Let the organization run it how they see fit. If they think that, if something does pop up on their radar where they think that it's a good fit and they think it's a good investment of their resources, they have, so far have proved, unlike past regimes, to be trustworthy. So I'm going to let them run the team as they see fit. I think they definitely have a very talented roster now that has people excited. Um, you know, as far as I can think of, this is one of the few Lions rosters where people would actually give them a chance to go into Arrowhead on the first game of the season and get a victory in our entire life. I can't think of many Lions rosters where people would think that that was they could go in and beat the defending Super Bowl champions in Week 1. So it's definitely exciting times. I like the roster. But if something happens and the Lions were to make a trade down the road some point this season, I'm going to trust in the leadership to do what's right for the organization because so far they're steering us in the right direction. So our next segment here is just talking is going to be called Bank on It. I'm not a betting guy myself, Jeff or Joe. I don't believe you or Jeff is either. When it comes to the NFL, we don't necessarily get in on the odds lines and things like that. We're not betting on all the various. Seems like there's a ton of the betting apps nowadays since it became legal. But the bank on it section, we'll just focus on our sort of predictions and what we think is going to happen and sort of proclaiming that proudly. So earlier this preseason we talked about our Super Bowl predictions. Joe, you went with Kansas City and Detroit for the Super Bowl this year as a rematch of this Week 1 matchup. Are you going to keep that now that we're here in the regular season, or do you want to change either of those teams as we move forward?
I'm not going to change my teams, but I'm not going to say that's necessarily the outcome that's going to take place. I don't want to be a predictor of Detroit and Kansas City in the Super Bowl, and then lo and behold, they're playing Week 1, and we get our fulfillment of the Super Bowl in Week 1 with them playing each other. But it's not a whole lot of teams that I can see in the AFC. Getting Cincinnati's in there, and I think they're good. But I really think that Detroit is one of the better teams in the NFC, and I think that they have a good chance at making it to the Super Bowl.
For sure, for sure. And I think my picks were Cincinnati and Philadelphia. I think it was a little bit frightening at first when the calf injury happened for Joe Burrow. I might have had that been a long-term injury, might have changed my pick just because the AFC North is a very challenging division. But I'm gonna hold there. I still think Cincinnati and Philadelphia are my two teams. When you look at the NFC in particular, I think your sort of your top three quarterbacks in the NFC currently are Jalen Hurts, probably Kirk Cousins, and I would put Jared Goff up there because he's been playing rather well. Dak Prescott would probably be up there toward if you're looking at your top five. So, but I think Jalen Hurts in Philadelphia. I know they lost a number of pieces on defense, but they added quite a few really talented guys from Georgia to that team in the draft. So I think they'll be fine. And then Cincinnati. Joe Burrow being okay, not going to miss any time with that calf injury. It seems. I think he can certainly lead Cincinnati there, but of course he'll have to beat the Chiefs. So we'll see how that goes. Um, one of our sections or one of our segments that we've done here on the Lions Grid in past seasons is the King of the North. So taking a look at the NFC rankings and seeing where teams are at in terms of placement there. And of course, it's the start of the season. So, Joe, all teams are 0-0. No one's got any wins. No one's got any losses. Minnesota this week is playing Tampa Bay this week. Of course, Detroit is playing Kansas City. And Green Bay and Chicago are actually starting off the season playing against each other. So we will definitely have a King of the North when it comes to week 2 of the NFL season, at least assuming that Green Bay and Chicago don't tie in their matchup. So it's going to be interesting to see who comes out on top in that game. But right now, NFC North wide open. And Joe, I know we both in the preseason took the Lions to win the NFC North. So hopefully they will be sitting on the throne at the end of the year. But we'll keep an eye on that in our King of the North segment as we move forward. The Lions don't play their first game against an NFC North opponent until week 4 when they travel out to Lambeau to take on the Packers. But the good news there, Joe, is unlike last season where it was the last game of the year and it's in that frozen tundra that is Lambeau Field, we're playing them in September. So it's not going to be as cold, should be a little bit more manageable, and hopefully a recipe for success for the Lions. But we'll keep an eye on that NFC North race.
Yeah, I think that the Detroit Lions are, if they're set to play Green Bay at the 4th week of the season in Green Bay, and then they don't play them again until Thanksgiving, and that's a home game. Those are two easily more winnable games than to say, I'll play them mid-season or whatever, and then play them last week of the season. And then Chicago, playing Chicago, I think that, we have a good chance at winning both of those games. And then Minnesota, we have a good chance at winning both. Those games are at the end of the season this year.
Yep.
And I think we have a good chance at winning the both of those because, it'll be indoors for those ones. And then the Chicago Bears, one of them's indoors and the other one is not going to be too cold outside.
Well, it's very interesting. Obviously, divisional games are hugely important. We've always talked about how if you can beat your division opponents because you play them twice in a season, it really sets you up in a good place, not only to win your division and get a playoff berth that way, but also it helps out greatly from a wild card perspective. And the interesting thing this year for the Lions is that of their 6 games against the NFC North opponents, 5 of those are happening in November, December, and January. So most of that action is going to be happening at the end of the season for the Lions. So as the season, goes on, those games are going to become more and more important. And the fact that they're against divisional opponents certainly should make for some interesting football later on the season. So it sets itself up very nicely for us to, talk about those games, and should be some really good football at the end of the year. All right. Now we've talked about the league. We've talked about, sort of the NFC North. Let's bring it in. Let's talk about today's game. As we mentioned, Travis Kelce questionable. I'm not sure if he's been ruled out or not yet. It is after 6:50. So I'm not sure if I'm not seeing anything new out here just yet. No, he is out. It is confirmed that Travis Kelce will not be playing in tonight's Thursday night football matchup between the Lions and the Chiefs. So we know he's not going to be there. An interesting stat that I saw during Get Up this morning on ESPN was that 93% of Mahomes' career touchdowns have been thrown with Travis Kelce on the field. That doesn't mean he's thrown 93% of them to Travis Kelce, but the majority of his touchdowns, 93% of them in his career, have been thrown with Kelce on the field. So not having that security blanket on the field is certainly a big thing for Patrick Mahomes in this offense for the Chiefs. And Joe, one of the things we talked about last year on the Lions grid was that set this Lions or that Lions team apart from previous teams was their ability to capitalize on opportunities. Here you are playing the defending Super Bowl champions, Week 1. One of their star players is surprisingly out of this game. Chris Jones, another one of their stars on defense, is out. This sets itself up as a fantastic opportunity for the Lions to come in and get a win against a team in a hostile environment where teams don't normally get wins. We'll have to see if the Lions can take advantage of this opportunity. But what are your thoughts about Kelce not being able to get on the field tonight for the Chiefs?
Well, I have him in fantasy football, and I've already got his replacement. I put Everett from the L.A. Chargers in there, and it's a good thing that Kelce's out, because he's really a go-to target for Mahomes in the red zone. He's a go-to target throughout the course of an entire football game, and it's just it's not really the best thing for Detroit to. Well, no, it's not really the best thing for Kansas City to be missing out on one of their best receivers, best tight ends, best players at that position in the league. I took him as the first overall draft pick in our draft, and he was the third overall draft pick because I picked third, but as my first overall draft pick, and I really think that with missing him missing him in the season opener, it's going to bode well for the Detroit Lions, and it's going to give them a better opportunity to win this football game.
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit too in the preseason. Ever since the Chiefs sort of traded away Tyreek Hill, they really haven't had a second really flashy playmaker outside of Travis Kelce. Like he has been the go-to guy. He is certainly the superstar on that offense, opposite of Patrick Mahomes. So not having him, I think, is definitely it. Like I said, it's an opportunity for the Lions, and when these opportunities come knocking, and you have the ability to go in here and get a game against the defending Super Bowl champs, hopefully we'll be able to celebrate a victory. The next time we talk, and you spoke about having your star players, not having them on the injury report. Of course, the great news was earlier this week that Amon-Ra St. Brown was removed from the Lions injury report. His ankle is doing better. He's not even listed on there as limited or questionable or anything like that. So he is a full go for tonight. So a good thing, because obviously Jameson Williams, of course, is serving his suspension. Having St. Brown out there is going to be really crucial for our passing attack. And I'm a little biased, I will admit, because I have him in both of my fantasy leagues as well. But I would love to see St. Brown come out here and get to a good start and pick up where he and Goff left off last year, because I certainly think they have the ability to be, again, another great combo, as they have been the last couple of seasons. So Chris Jones, we know he will not be playing tonight. We talked about that, about the potential about him being traded. He's still in that holdout against the Chiefs and hasn't reported back. So, again, another opportunity there with one of their top defenders out. But one of the things that Jeff had touched on earlier this preseason when we were doing episodes and sort of looking forward to this matchup between the Lions and the Chiefs, was the fact that you really don't want to play Andy Reid teams off of bye weeks. And really, he hasn't played. It's been 207 days he and his coaching staff have had to prepare for the Detroit Lions. So it's not a bye week per se, but it has given them plenty of time to prepare for this matchup. Now, throwing in the wrinkle of Travis Kelce getting knocked out here this week certainly helps out. But it's going to be a challenge. It's not going to be easy to go. Kansas City going into Arrowhead Stadium is a very loud stadium. It's not an easy place for teams to play, and having that much time for him to prepare is a problem. And Patrick Mahomes himself, I saw this stat as well when I was watching Get Up this morning. Patrick Mahomes is 5-0 in his opening games in the first games of the season as a starting quarterback, and with 18 touchdowns and 0 interceptions on his stat line. Joe, do you think that obviously we have the Kelsey injury, we have Chris Jones being out? Do you think that is enough to Amon-Ra St. Brown is good to go for the Lions? Do you think all of the factors work themselves out to be enough to overcome the fact that Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes are so good in these week one matchups? Do you think there's enough there where the Lions have a chance to come in here and steal one from Kansas City week one?
Yeah, yeah. I think Detroit
Mhm.
Lions. I think they have a good chance at upsetting the Kansas City Chiefs. The the injury report when it says that Kelsey was out, the favor to win the game went from 6.5 down to 4.5. When Kelsey got injured, so that tells you that Kelsey's got a difference maker of at least 2 points on the spectrum. But I really think that Detroit has a good chance to win this football game because they have a lot of good talent at every position.
Mhm.
Uh, I really think that Kansas City not having all of their players uh, like Chris Jones and Travis Kelsey in tonight's matchup is going to be a hindrance for them because the best player on Kansas City's defense is Chris Jones, is what I saw from Michael Wilbon and part of the interruption. And, the best receiver, tight end, or whatever you want to say it is Travis Kelsey on the offense for the Kansas City Chiefs. So I think that Detroit has a good chance of coming in here and upsetting them. Yes, I think Detroit will upset them. My prediction earlier today was 31-26 Kansas City. And what I'm changing it to now is I'll probably just go with the vice versa 31-26 Detroit.
Very nice, locking in the Lions. So yeah, I think in a similar boat. Obviously, there's been a lot of hype around the Lions, right? It's not only the local media here, but we are starting to see the national media as well, like the Lions, quite a bit. I think for me, one of the things that sort of take into consideration when doing the calculations is the fact that we didn't get to see a whole lot of the offense or the defense during the preseason. So this is their first chance, right? This is the first opportunity where we're going to see this new look team, this 2023 Lions team, really come out and have a chance to make a statement. We know. I think at this point everyone's heard it. The Lions finished out last year winning 8 of their last 10 games. Their defense was a struggle. At the end of 2022, they finished 29th in overall defense. They were the 30th passing defense. They were the 29th rushing defense. They were 29th in scoring. Their offense was definitely the strength of the team. And then we had the offseason. They added players through the draft. They added free agents to address those issues on defense. And this is really going to be the first game where we can see, what those changes equate to, because it was great to see the preseason. They went 2-1, but we again didn't get to see a whole lot of the starters in there, so we haven't really got to see we didn't get to see a lot of ones on the first teamers playing against first teamers. So we don't really know how much the defense is going to be improved, and certainly having a chance here in the national spotlight to show sort of what the effect is of all those moves they made in the offseason. I'm certainly looking forward to tuning in tonight to see how improved that defense is, because as good as the Lions were winning their last 8 of 10 in the season last year, there certainly is room for improvement on that defense. So They definitely made changes throughout the year that made them more competitive. And I think they've certainly done a good job of bringing in talent to help address their needs. Now it's time to put that all together. The theory sounds good. Let's see it actually happen out on the field. But I'm with you, Joe. I am going to go with the Lions as well over Kansas City in this game. Part of me would love to see a shootout sort of develop. That's not really a glowing recommendation for the defense, though, if that were to happen. But I know the last time that Jared Goff played Kansas City, I want to say that game ended up being like 54-51 and just a huge shootout between the Rams and the Chiefs. I think the Chiefs at that point, though, also had Tyreek Hill and definitely had Travis Kelce out on the field. So obviously their offense was a little bit more explosive. But that being said, I would definitely think both of these teams could put up north of 30 points in this game. And if I had to put a score on it, again, I'm going with the Lions as the winner. I would love to see the Lions hit maybe I'll go crazy and say something like 42 and do like a 42 to 31 or something like that, and maybe to be able to distance themselves late in the game, because I think certainly you can't discredit Patrick Mahomes. I think that he, no matter who's out there, is going to be able to put up some good numbers. But I think, again, missing some of those players like Travis Kelce, who is a big difference maker, I think that'll help the Lions distance themselves by the end of the game. So, I'm hoping to see a pretty close game, a pretty exciting game, but ultimately I think the Lions being having their full complement of, well, not their full complement of weapons, because JMO is on suspension, but having more of their weapons available should help them be able to sort of win this war between these two teams, who I think are going to be two teams to keep an eye on this season. So we have it official there, Joe. We're locking it in. We're both going with the Lions. We'll keep our pick'em records updated here throughout the season, but we're both being the hometown homers, going for the Lions to go snatch that win in Kansas City against the defending Super Bowl champs. So I know the game is on NBC tonight. I know it's also being broadcast on the Lions radio network, which if you're in the local area with us, that is 97.1 The Ticket. But again, kickoff is at 8:20 tonight on NBC. So I know I'll be tuning in. Joe, I assume you'll be doing the same, and really looking forward to the outcome of this game. And then, we'll be back next week to be talking, give you sort of our reaction to this game, sort of talk about, what the sort of the fallout with the what the aftermath of the game looks like, and then also talk about the upcoming matchup between the Seahawks and the Lions as they have their first game of the home season. Of course, the Seahawks won that close game last year against the Lions, which helped them get to the playoffs and sent the, sort of was one of the things that prevented the Lions from making the playoffs last year, even though they had that great push towards the end of the year. That's also going to be a great game. But tonight, it starts the Super Bowl run. Lions getting a win in Kansas City. Me and Joe both going with the Lions there. Joe, thank you for joining me today, and everybody who's been tuning in, thank you for watching. We'll be back, like I said, next week, and we'll catch you during the next episode. Go Lions, and have a great night, everyone.